Elizabeth Gilbert went from a starving artist, a starving writer, to selling over 12 million copies of a book she wrote. In this video, we're going to be talking about how she went about doing that. We're going to be reviewing her book called Big Magic, which is all about creative living beyond fear. And it's sectioned off into 6 different categories. We're going to talk about 5 of them. Each of the 6 points become increasingly more important to the creative process and creative living, so make sure to stick around. And if you like content on creativity, if you want to be inspired, if you want to push to start your creative dream, feel free to subscribe to the channel. I post a video every single week, either reviewing a book on creativity or talking about a different approach to creativity or all things creativity. Let's see how many times I can say creativity in the video. The first point we're going to be discussing in regards to creative living beyond fear is obviously courage. The way that Elizabeth Gilbert talks about courage in her book, Big Magic, I don't know why I said big magic like that. It has to do with this idea of finding the treasure within ourselves. Oftentimes we are far too afraid to start any sort of creative process. And that's really where our creativity dies. Because we have to have the boldness, the chutzpah, the kind of unashamed confidence to search within and say, what is it that I can bring about that the world could see? What we tend to do is we defend our own fears. We're like, oh no, I'm not gifted enough to do that, or I'm not talented enough to start that book, or I don't have enough experience to start that business. And yet we still tend to defend these things. They tend to keep us at an arm's length from the creativity that we so desperately want to create from our own lives. And here's the thing about fear, is that it's terribly boring. Fear marches to the beat of the exact same drum every single time that you go to start the creative project that you've been wanting to. It's the I'm not good enough, or I'm too young, or I'm too old, or I'm not experienced, or whatever it may be for you, fill in the blank. But the thing about creativity and the thing about finding the treasures within ourselves is that it breaks that cycle of boringness. It goes, well, what if instead of trying to lead a meeting like I normally do, I'm going to try to tell a story. I'm going to write a brief, but I'm only going to write it as if I'm a copywriter or a screenwriter. I'm going to tell this narrative out. It's different ways of approaching things. And when you do that, what you're doing is you're overcoming the fear that so inhibits your ability to create things. And far too often we like to hide in the box of our own limitation. And I love what she writes. She's quoting kind of like a colloquial phrase that gets used quite often. It says this: argue for your limitations and you will get to keep them. And that's, I think, the whole point of that first idea, is that in order to create and in order to live a life of creativity, you have to have the courage to break out of the limitations that you set before yourself, which we've talked about many times before. But again, Elizabeth Gilbert, Big Magic, different book, different ideas, same ideas, different book. I don't know. So that's the first concept. It's that you got to have the courage. You got to muster it up. You got to go for it. And the second idea, she calls it enchantment. And what Elizabeth Gilbert means by enchantment is that she talks about ideas and different discovery points as if they're in this kind of like, ethereal realm in the unseen world, and ideas kind of traverse from host to host. It's quite creative in the way that she's approached it, but I think it's very true to the way that we experience creativity. And I'll give you an example. Have you ever gone to see a movie and you've watched it and you thought to yourself, wow, I feel like I could have told that story? Or have you ever written a book? Well, maybe you haven't written the book. That's why you're watching this video. No, I'm just kidding, not yet. No. Or maybe you think to yourself like, I could have written that song, or I could have done that briefing, or whatever it is for you. It's the idea that ideas themselves, it's like they try to find someone who is willing to steward the work in order to bring those ideas into the real world. And the thing about this is you'd think the concept of ideas possessing people would kind of circumnavigate the hard work that you need to put in. But what's interesting is that ideas leave you. And we know that ideas leave us because we've experienced this before. We had this idea or this eureka moment in the past, and we thought, oh, this would be brilliant if we brought it into the real world. And yet what we tend to do is we procrastinate. We don't have the courage to overcome our fears. And so that idea slowly dies. And then later in the year, you see somebody else come up with that same idea. It's as if the idea has moved on from you to someone else. And while I have mixed opinions about the legitimacy of the kind of spiritual dimensions of what she's talking about, I do think there is some merit to what she's saying. I read a book a few years ago, and I remember thinking to myself, this is the book I would have written if I would have been 3 years further along in my writing career. You know, it's like, it's finding the courage to let yourself be enchanted by these ideas and then bringing them into the world. And another example she uses of this in regards to ideas being all around us is the concept of multiple discovery. And multiple discovery is when a number of people discover the same thing at the same point in time, and they live at different parts of the world. We see this in our own lives when we come up with a thought or a certain reflection on the world or politics or whatever your topic of choice is, and you go to talk to a friend and they think to themselves, wait, I had that same idea. How did we come up with the same conclusion, even though we hadn't conspired with each other to find a certain solution? And it's because there is this idea that she talks about in regards to enchantment, that ideas find people, and they find multiple people throughout time and space at the same point. I hope that makes sense. I don't know if I've done a great job of explaining that. And that's the second point. You're meant to let ideas, in a sense, possess you, and from that place where the idea makes itself known to you, you bring it into actualization. And the third idea is the idea of permission. Oftentimes we want people to validate us. We want people to tell us that we can go for it and that we can do it. And what she posits in the book is that we have to push against the utilitarian world that we live in. Look at me using these big fancy flipping words. What I mean by a utilitarian world is that everything that we do tends to have an efficient end. Again, what I mean by that is that we've lost the art of wasting time. We've lost the art of just sitting around doodling or going for a walk just to go on a walk, not because you're trying to reach a certain step count or not because you're trying to draw to meet a quota, but you're trying to do these things just because you enjoy the art of creating something that is beautiful and potentially aesthetic and something that brings you life. I'm getting all fired up here. Give it a bite! And that's why you have to pursue something that brings you life, because when you pursue something that brings you life, the life it brings you is the validation itself for you to continue on in that creative process. I love the example she gets. It's from a German director named Werner, or Werner for all those Americans out there, and Werner for my German audience. Hi, begets, sehr gut, and dir? Yeah, anyways. Werner Herzog. He was a director in Germany, and a kind of a budding director reached out to him, and he was talking about the woes of his creative process and how difficult it was, and how he was struggling and all of these things. And I love what he writes. This is on page 116, and he says this: nobody wants to hear it. Steal a camera if you must, but stop whining and get back to work. That is the permission that we all need. We need to stop complaining about the creative things that we can't do because of the limitations that we have, and we need to embrace the permission that we've already been given based off of the effort that we're putting in to bring something that we love into our own lives. So that's the third point. And the fourth point is persistence. We've talked about this pretty much ad nauseum in different videos, but there has to be a sense of love for the craft that you're putting your hand to. Even if you're not good, anything, like literally anything that you dedicate 10 years to, or as Malcolm Gladwell says, 10,000 hours to, you're gonna become an expert. So don't look at where you currently are. Look at, again, it's not how good you are, it's how good you wanna be. Plug my video right there, link below. It's about how much you're willing to put in the hard work to bring to completion the ideas that you have, or the ideas, as Elizabeth Gilbert says, the ideas that have possessed you. Are you willing to have the persistence to push through? And here's the catch, is if you're creating something and you don't enjoy creating it, then you need to stop creating it. The whole point of the creative process is enjoying the process. And oftentimes the question that gets asked is, how do you know when to push forward and how do you know when to give up? I think about that classic image where it's like the guy, he's young and he's digging for diamonds, and then it's like he's turned around and he's got like the pickaxe on his shoulder, and it's like if he would have just kept going a little further, he would have hit the diamonds. Like maybe you feel like that's your own personal life, where it's like you've been digging for so long, you like keep putting your bucket down into the well and you're not drawing up water. But the way that you determine whether or not to continue or not is how much are you enjoying the art of creating itself. Because if you're enjoying it, then you can do it for the rest of your life, and it doesn't matter if you get discovered. But if you're hating it, that means you need to move on to something else, potentially another creative project. And that's not to say that there are times you have to push through and you have to put your negative feelings aside. But if you're not actually enjoying the art that you're creating on a regular basis, then I would encourage you to move on to something else. But the question is, like, how the heck do we actually push forward? What does it mean to continue on with something that you enjoy? And what it looks like is setting your own personal goals that no one else can dictate. For me personally, it's how can I post a video every single week? For you, it's maybe how can I make a painting that I enjoy once a month? Or how can I host a creative business meeting once a quarter or something like that, where you set internal goals that you can hit that aren't based on external validation from other people. That's really the crux of persistence, is setting those internal goals so that you can reach them and you can be proud of the thing that you've created. And the fifth point, I think this is the best chapter in her entire book. And it's the idea of trust. Oftentimes we think that creativity is meant to serve us, but what she puts forward, and I think it's a brilliant idea, is that we are meant to serve creativity. We are meant to be the ones who are meant to steward the call of the gift that we have been given. And this unique thing happens when you start trusting the craft and taking care of it, not you expecting it to pay all of your bills. It's that you create out of a place of flow. You create out of a place of willingness to make mistakes and it not define you because it's not tethered to your livelihood. She worked a full-time job. I'm working a full-time job. You're probably working a full-time job. Oftentimes we think if we were given an unfettered amount of time just to put our hand to the craft that we would make these spectacular things, but that's actually not what makes art. In fact, that's not what makes art sacred either. What makes art sacred is the time that you steal away with it. The intimate moments where you're willing to put in the 20 minutes, the hour, the 3 hours after your day job to make the art that you love. Because it's not the product that is sacred. The sacred act of creativity is the process itself. It's putting in the countless hours of refinement and enjoyment and playfulness and going on that scavenger hunt of finding the treasure within and pulling it out of you and showing the world and saying, this is what I was capable of all along, and yet I didn't know it until 1, I had the courage to overcome, 2, I had the willingness to let the ideas take hold of me, 3, I gave myself permission to actually do the thing that I wanted to do, not waiting for other people to give me the green light, 4, having the persistence to push through something even when it becomes difficult and falling in love with the creative process and the journey of it, and 5th and finally, trusting that the call that you have on your life to create things will continue to bring itself to fruition if you're willing to put in the time and the energy and the love. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to watch more, click on this guy, click on that guy. If you want to get the book, make sure to click the link below, and I will see you very soon. Bye.